Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt. Welcome back to the DMZ.
Congratulations. Welcome to the DMZ. Congratulations, Bill. We have reached the peak of Blogging Heads fame. We have achieved a dialogue which had more than 350 comments. Congratulations, Bill Scher.
The DMZ record. And I understand from Blogging Heads president and CEO Bob Wright, this is kind of akin to batting 400 in baseball.
Yeah.
This is a stand. I guess we're not the first to do it, but it's rarely attained.
And the others who have done it have not done it with such panache. I may, if I say so myself.
Well, the credit goes to the commenters, those who said, I will not let so-and-so get the last word about the George Zimmerman trial. I will continue to bludgeon this discussion to the ground and ensure the DMZ achieves this lofty goal.
I completely disagree. I think all the credit goes to us for our stimulating conversation, driving those comments. And I have to say, if there were a Mount Rushmore for Blogging Heads, my face and your face would be on that. If there were a Cooperstown for Blogging Head heroes, we are now ensconced in a very elite group of stars. And our work is done here. Good show, Bill. Good talking with you.
Well, I think there's a lot more to talk about today. Let's see. Let's not rest on our laurels here. Let's see if we can jack it up.
Okay, if you insist.
Now,
I will rest on my laurels, but
I'm going to make a confession. I tend to have a lot of distractions during my day. I don't get to consume as much news and commentary as I would like because I work out of the house and kids are off and around, and there's always lots of things drawing my attention away. So I often cheat and just read your Twitter feed to find out what's going on in the world. And
in fact, that's good advice for all people out there. No need to, don't trouble yourself with actually reading the news. I am equal time. You come to.
You're the only individual Twitter feed that I have up on my tweet deck. Everything else is like a list or whatnot. But I just keep Matt Lewis there because I know Matt Lewis is going to tell me what is roiling conservative waters.
I will not only tell you what the news is, I will tell you what to think about the news.
Just yesterday, I became a libertarian. I didn't know why. It was because I was reading your Twitter feed. So it seems like there's been a lot of talk about the Kentucky. I actually was watching Charlie Cook on C-SPAN because I watch Matt Lewis's Twitter feed during the day when I'm washing dishes, and I can't look at Twitter. I keep C-SPAN videos up in the background. And Charlie Cook was giving one of his election previews that don't really tell me anything I didn't already know. And he's walking through what races are toss-ups, what are not toss-ups. And someone from the audience said, "Hey, you didn't mention Kentucky." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, Kentucky might be something." But a lot of the discussion was, what kind of a chance this young Democrat, Grimes, I think, has a chance of knocking McConnell off. And I think he gave this talk a couple days before McConnell took a swipe at his main Republican challenger, I think Matt Bivens.
Bevin, we're not sure yet.
So no one knows how to properly pronounce his name. But he's a wealthy businessman. He's coming from the right, and McConnell is trying to take him down a peg early with an ad calling him "Bailout Bevin," talking about help he got from the Connecticut government about one of his businesses, tax liens he has on his business properties, things like that. And Bevin seemed quite prepared for this. Not that he responded defensively. He didn't really do an ad that defended his business record. He just went right at McConnell, talking about his support for Wall Street bailouts and other establishment type positions. So voting for liberal judges, things like that. You know, I'm sure these are judges that sort of everyone voted on, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But it was a polished video. He spoke into the camera directly. He was easy on the eyes. He didn't seem like a crackpot. And I would imagine, just based on the comments I saw through your Twitter feed and then the links and such, that conservative Washington sort of was like, hey, this guy seems like he's not a chump. Maybe this guy is onto something. Kentucky voted for Rand Paul in the Republican primary against the person that McConnell had put up to pass the torch to. So obviously Kentucky Republicans have an inclination to buck the Republican establishment. Why can't this Bevins guy take McConnell out? Maybe he's going to actually get some more financial help, cause some more conservative buzz, and make a run for this. That was my reaction from seeing the back and forth. I don't know if you feel like McConnell's in trouble here or not.
Well, I think he has to take it very seriously because this is, like, let's say that the primary challenge weakens him, and he has to expend a lot of resources there, which could happen, could conceivably happen. He would then be weakened for the general election, and even if Grimes doesn't beat McConnell, this is a sort of form of Operation Chaos. I mean, if Democrats can have the Republican minority leader fighting for his political life all year, it's fun for them. You can imagine that they love this. They love the primary. I think McConnell is very wise to take this very seriously. If you look, we've seen now a few years of this pattern where we've had these incumbents Republican incumbents be challenged, and sometimes they survive, like Orrin Hatch, and sometimes they don't survive, like Bennett. And so we've seen enough of these that the predictor seems to be how quickly does the incumbent take it seriously? And do they see it coming, and do they raise money the way that Hatch did? And I think that Mitch McConnell has seen it coming. He has been very aware that this could happen for a long time, and he's taken it very seriously. And he's hitting this guy, trying to define him, Bevin, before he defines himself, or at least trying to muddy the waters so that there's not a clear contrast, there's not a clear shot at McConnell. I suspect that's smart. The other problem, or the interesting thing, and I want to get into this more later, I won't get into it as much now, but you have the problem is that taking someone like McConnell out, because he basically built the Republican Party in Kentucky. He obviously has a lot of tenure and power in the Senate. So taking someone like that out requires a perfect storm. And if you're McConnell, you can't wait around to see if it's going to happen. If the storm might be coming, you take action. By the time it's obvious, it's too late. And so, what happens is these people, like if you looked at Christine O'Donnell, who won her primary, let's not forget, they seem to be floundering for a long time. I mean, there were months and months and months where O'Donnell was floundering. And then they catch fire. All of a sudden, overnight almost, Palin backs them, tweets about them. Limbaugh and Levin talk about them. Jim DeMint endorses them. Something happens, and there's a tipping point. Once that tipping point happens, it's too late if you're the incumbent to take them seriously. But the problem is, in Kentucky, you have Rand Paul, who has endorsed Mitch McConnell. That is a huge problem, I think, if you were trying to oust Mitch McConnell.
But do endorsements matter anymore? I mean, how many times has even someone seemingly with cred, made an endorsement to only have the grassroots say, I really don't care what you think, I'm going to go with what seems the most ideologically pure thing to do?
Generally, I think you're right. Generally, I don't think endorsements matter that much. I think this one does matter for a couple of reasons. I think that, first of all, Rand Paul is special and unique. He is a rising star. He is very popular with grassroots Tea Party conservatives. Number two, he is the junior senator. It's his state. So this could potentially discourage other outsiders from coming in. So if you are Mike Lee in Utah, and you might be inclined to intervene in Kentucky. I'm not suggesting he is, but let's just use this as a hypothetical. The fact that Rand Paul it's his state, it's his backyard, and he's supporting McConnell, I think would be a disincentive. So I think it's symbolic because just 2 years ago, Rand Paul, in a similar race, going up against McConnell's handpicked guy, is now saying, no, I support McConnell. Now, the challenger, Bevin, he hired this company that is run by Pat Toomey's former campaign manager, and one of their VPs is Pat Toomey's former spokesman, also a former spokesperson for the Club for Growth. Pat Toomey yesterday came out and endorsed Mitch McConnell. It's unclear whether or not the Club for Growth will get involved. They sounded cautious, but they didn't close the door to supporting McConnell's ouster, but they sounded very cautious. So I think that this requires a perfect storm. You need all of these things to happen. And the first day this guy announced, basically, you have people, Pat Toomey saying, I support the other guy. Pat Toomey, who, by the way, ousted, Arlen Specter. So he has symbolic credibility on this issue. So I think at this point,
Toomey, is someone who part of a Joe Manchin on background checks and then got the ire of the right for doing that. So I mean, this sort of speaks to my previous point. It seems like few people have that much political currency to give to the ideological base to do one thing that breaks ranks, and all of a sudden you're no good to me anymore.
Right. No, I think there's a lot of truth there. All I'm saying is that I think McConnell's smart to take this very seriously, and I think because McConnell took this seriously, and by the way, you could say he co-opted people. I mean, Rand Paul. What if Rand Paul? Think of it this way. Don't think of it in terms of what good does the Rand Paul endorsement do McConnell. Think of it this way. What if Rand Paul had gone the other direction? What if McConnell hadn't hired Jesse Benton, part of the Rand Paul family, literally, as well as being Rand Paul's former campaign manager? What if he hadn't co-opted or won over? I mean, we can look at this from a positive standpoint. He won them over, or a negative standpoint, he co-opted them. But what if Rand Paul was actively supporting a grassroots conservative challenge against Mitch McConnell? Would that not be unbelievable and incredibly dangerous? So I think the wrong way to look at it is to say, yeah, Rand Paul do endorsements matter. Think of it, what if it had gone the other way? And what if Pat Toomey had immediately endorsed the challenger who Pat Toomey's former staff is supporting? And then what if the Club for Growth had gotten it? You would have an unbelievably dangerous situation for McConnell, and I think he is largely, at least up until this point, it's really early, and these things tend to break late. But as of now, he seems to be managing this pretty well.
And do we have a sense, though, to how much energy is Rand Paul going to put into this? Is this a token endorsement? We agree to have a detente. I was a little mad that he backed my primary challenger, but we got to work together in the Senate. Let's not have a big family fight here. So he'll endorse me, and I'll endorse him. That's going to be the end of it. Or is he going to work for McConnell? Is he going to actively go after Bevins and give McConnell ideological cover? Is he going to respond to Bevin and say, "Hey, you can't knock McConnell for the TARP vote. He's been concerned about X, Y, and Z." Do we know yet how much Rand's going to put into this?
Well, it is interesting that he appeared to be much more hostile toward Liz Cheney's challenge of Mike Enzi than he was toward the challenge of McConnell. Rand Paul actually had some kind words to say about the challenger, even though he's supporting McConnell. So I think that's a very important question. Rand Paul just sort of nominally supporting McConnell is important. As I mentioned, it's more important what he's not doing, that he's not actively supporting the challenger. Having said that, it would be really helpful if Rand Paul was in a TV ad for McConnell, if Rand Paul stumped with McConnell. If I had to bet right now, I would bet that he does not do that he keeps a little bit of a distance. Because, as you mentioned, Even Rand Paul has to worry about his right flank. Even Rand Paul has to worry about offending the Tea Party and grassroots conservatives. This reminds me, there's that great line in The Godfather where, and this is a horrible analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway because what the hell. No, I'm not comparing Republicans to drug dealers. But there's the line where they want, this other family wants the Don to get involved in narcotics. And the Don says, and then they say, like, well, you've got all these friends in the police. And the Don says, it is true, I have all these friends in the police, but they would not be so friendly if I were involved in such a nasty business as the drug trade. I'm paraphrasing here. Right. But my point is, even the Don, even Rand Paul has to worry about his image with this right flank because he's going to run for president. Hint, hint, hint. Everybody knows this. So that is an interesting factor. Now, as I mentioned, though, there are strange bedfellows here. I already told you about Toomey, but and we talked about Jesse Benton. So this is a guy. I think he is. I believe he's married to one of Ron Paul's daughters or granddaughters. He was on the Ron Paul campaign. He managed Rand Paul's campaign, and he is now managing Mitch McConnell's campaign. So that has to be like an ace in the hole. I don't know to what extent he can get the Pauls on board, but one imagines that that blood is thicker than water.
Now, my personal interest in this is not just I don't want to just see McConnell dance because it's fun to see a minority leader dance. This speaks to what's going to happen in 2014 generally. Is the Senate going to stay in Democratic hands or not? So I think a number of analysts have explained, almost all of the turf being defended in 2014 is Democratic turf. You have many more red state Democrats that are in tricky re-election scenarios. You don't really have any Republicans, in tricky blue state scenarios. I think you have Susan Collins in Maine, she's not really considered to be very threatened right now. But you have, you have the open seats in Montana and Iowa that have been Democratic held, but they're conservative leaning. You have states like Louisiana with Mary Landrieu, Mark Pryor in Arkansas, also open seat in West Virginia. I forgot about that one. And I think
Capito.
What's that? Right, with Capito is almost a lock there. South Dakota is an open, which is going to be tough for Democrats to keep. I feel like I'm missing one contested seat. Landrieu Pryor is one other that I'm missing. But the point is, it's a tough field for Democrats, but are there going to be gimme races that Republicans screw up a la 2012 because they nominate another Joe Miller? Begich in Alaska is what I was trying to remember. If they nominate Joe Miller in Alaska again, or a Ken Buck type that they did in Colorado, or the Murdoch and Todd Aiken types. Are there
you mentioned Buck. I do want to say I'd not met her before. I recently met Jane Norton, who was defeated in that primary. Mm-hmm. What a great woman! Very impressive. Her husband has been hugely active in the pro-life cause for years, and it's a shame that she allowed herself to be cast as the establishment candidate in that race, because she could have been, I think, a very good senator.
What's always so weird about primaries, and I don't think, this can happen on the Democratic side too, but I think it happens more on the Republican side, that these, and we were talking about this before the show. These issues come up as touchstone issues, purity test type issues to divide the true believer and the establishment. But what gets coalesced around is such hair splitting
right.
that you wonder why so much emphasis gets put on it, and then you end up with the Ken Bucks instead of someone, or here you got Enzi in Wyoming. This guy is pretty conservative down the line. You got to really dig real deep to find the few times he's been willing to work across the aisle on pretty ticky-tack stuff. To say this guy's not the real deal from a conservative perspective. So are we going to have situations like that are going to kick out sure things? I think McConnell would probably be a Democrat, all things being equal. Kentucky is not really a blue state. Are there going to be a few states that Republicans throw away that make it, because essentially all those other states I mentioned, Republicans have to pretty much sweep to get control of the Senate back. So if they blow a couple, then the sweep's off. And so is there a fear on the Republican side and the conservative movement that this might happen? Hey, we blew it in 2012. We really should have made those mistakes. Let's not do that again. Or is it more just let's not listen to what the establishment, eggheads have to say. Let's just go down. Let's just go where our heart tells us to go.
I don't see it happening. These things could break late, but I don't see any obvious examples where Republicans are going to throw something away.
Well, Iowa's one where they might put up someone who's very right-wing, because that's open on both sides, and Democrats have coalesced around.
Where's that?
Iowa.
Okay.
I think Congressman Braley is pretty much there on the Democratic side. But you have the A-list candidates on the Republican side didn't get recruited, and so you might get someone who's very right wing, and Braley is considered a bit more moderate. So that's one example where they might give one away.
Iowa's people think Iowa's a Republican state. It's a tough state.
Yeah, Obama has won that state twice, but it's got a Republican governor now.
Right. Look, I think Republicans probably will fall short of taking back the Senate. I think they'll come close. They're obviously going to pick up a bunch of seats. I think it'll be closer, maybe within one seat or something. I doubt if they pull it off completely. They sort of have to run the table. And like Iowa's an example where I don't think Republicans probably win. But they'll pick up, they're going to win West Virginia. They're going to win a lot of these races. What I think is more interesting, to me at least, is another phenomenon that sort of goes back to what I was talking about with the Rand Paul having to worry about his own flank a little bit. It's that there are a couple things happening. So, one of the candidates that's running, well, he's not running yet, but everybody kind of thinks he's going to run, is a guy named Tom Cotton, who's a congressman in Arkansas. Who will likely run for that Senate seat. And he's incredibly experienced, knowledgeable, great resume, smart guy. And you have Liz Cheney running against Enzi. Now, that's a Republican seat, I think, either way, obviously. But what's interesting about it is, and this ties into the NSA vote, so this is going to, I don't want to confuse, anybody, so feel free to slow me down. I'm going to try to tie this together. It's a little bit abstract, but so then last night, as we're taping this, there was a vote that Justin Amash, sort of a libertarian, conservative congressman from Michigan, had this bill. I think it would essentially defund the NSA surveillance. And if you look at the vote, the way the vote split, you had people like Tom Cotton, who's seen as a conservative. He's going to be probably one of the kind of Tea Party guys running for U.S. Senate. And you had Michelle Bachmann, the head of the Tea Party caucus, vote with Obama and the NSA, essentially, for national security purposes. And then you had the people like Amash, the sort of Rand Paul wing conservatives, kind of libertarian-leaning conservatives. I would say libertarian populist. I'm still not sure what that is, but so there was this interesting split, and then you had again Liz Cheney running, you had Rand Paul be very critical of her, And this struck me as interesting because it seems like until recently, we had conflated ideology with toughness. And if you were sort of a young Tea Party sort of person who was anti-establishment, you all stuck together. And whether it was inconsistent or not, there was a consensus of what the conservative position was and what the rhino position was. And they stuck together. And I see that fraying. And so you have, the Liz Cheneys of the world who should, in a sense, appeal to the give 'em hell Tea Party zeitgeist, and the Rand Pauls of the world hating each other at odds. You have Tom Cotton and Michelle Bachmann at odds with Justin Amash. And in a sense, what we're doing is we're getting past the style. We're actually putting substance before style. So it used to be that the big schism, the big cleavage was between the sort of establishment insiders, the ruling party versus the young Tea Party upstarts. And that was always, I think, simplistic. And I think we're starting to outgrow that. And now what you're getting to is schisms over legitimate policy differences, over whether or not you believe in a more libertarian conservatism, or whether or not you believe in a more neocon conservatism.
Well, and this could be, there's a big split brewing here because you might have Congressman King run for president. He's openly flirting with the prospect right now, and he is openly attacking Rand Paul and Ted Cruz on these issues. And it's like I talked about with you previously, and I had a column the week about it. If Rand Paul was the eventual nominee, would this cause a fatal split in the party on national security? Would then the Kane wing, the Pete King wing, would they just walk and say, this is just not my party anymore? Now that doesn't have to go that far for it to cause a lot of agita amongst Republicans, but this is the kind of fundamental policy difference that it's not very easy to paper over, especially if someone offering the new direction, in this case the Rand Paul. I don't think Ted Cruz is going to be the nominee or even run. It would really step on Rand Paul's toes if he did. Rand Paul needs a clear field if he's going to be he's going to consolidate the Tea Party base and be the nominee. But I think that's a plausible scenario if that happened. And it's already been kind of fought out with Pete King, and Pete King loses. Do folks say, hey, this is not the Reagan party, it's not the National Security Party. Hillary Clinton, she's not afraid to pull the trigger. I'm okay going with her for 2016. I'll temporarily walk.
Right.
I'll start a third party. There's different. The Whigs collapsed over slavery. Teddy Roosevelt broke Republicans over progressive economic issues, and to some extent foreign policy too, because he was the imperialist and Taft was the isolationist. But that was a temporary split, and they came back together in 1916. So there's different degrees of splits, but it does seem like there's something brewing here.
I want to drill down though on this point that I find really interesting, but no one else seems to. Based on my Twitter feed, no one else seems to find it interesting, and I want to try to write about it, but maybe you can help me drill down on how to make the point. But it seems to me that it used to be that the Bachmans of the world and the Rand Pauls of the world and the Liz Cheneys of the world would stick together because the defining issue wasn't an issue. It was old versus new. It was establishment versus upstart. And they used to overlook a lot of differences and stick together, and they would sort of, again, it didn't have to be consistent, but there would be a consensus opinion that this is the grassroots conservative position, and let's all get behind this. It seems like the world has changed, and some people probably think this is a negative, that there's a schism. But I would actually argue that it's kind of healthy that now we're not fighting over sort of symbolism or superficial things like, are you an insider or have you been in D.C. a long time? We're starting to see them fight over actual policy differences that's transcending the new versus old, establishment versus upstart thing. And they're actually fighting. So the defining difference, in other words, Rand Paul is more likely to attack a new person, an upstart who is a neocon, than he is to attack someone who's been around a long time who is a libertarian. Are you following me? And
well, I'm following you.
Is
and
it just me that finds this interesting? Or
no, I mean, I think it is interesting. It does help explain Rand Paul's behavior in this respect. And I think to your point about this being a healthy thing, I mean, look at it this way: the Cold War is over, and the foreign policy glue. I mean, look, the Republicans were divided over foreign policy from Teddy Roosevelt to Eisenhower. So this split between to crudely say imperialist and isolationist has been around for a while, but then the Cold War kicked in. And Republicans generally took the anti-communist view, certainly after McCarthy and Nixon, if you will, and that kept them together foreign policy-wise for half a century. Now you're in a different world, so it's not it's certainly not unusual for a group to say, okay, let's rethink this. Maybe there's a different view to be had now that the challenges are different. And maybe we need to recalibrate as a party because of that. Now, I think some of what's driving it is simplistic and unhealthy. Let's do the opposite of Obama because we hate Obama. That's not a good reason to shift your foreign policy view. But if you're going to have a more thorough internal discussion, okay, what does it mean to be a conservative in a post-Cold War world? And look, if that means, maybe we can't be friends anymore, and we need to start different parties and work it out that way, so be it. I mean, that doesn't mean conservatism is dead. The conservatism can reform under different auspices. It might suck for a period of time until that gets hashed out. It was bad for Republicans in 1912, obviously, to split into two, but they won the presidency in 1920, so it wasn't the end of the world. This argument just might need to be hashed out for the pieces on the chessboard to. That's a bad metaphor, to be sorted out. But I think it would probably behoove conservatism to approach it from just take Obama out of the equation. Don't just react to what Obama's doing. Don't hate the NSA because Obama likes the NSA. That's not a good reason.
But let me stop you there, though, because I do think I generally agree with you that yes, you should always make everything you should do should be based on principle and sincere belief and not just politics. But having said that, it is interesting that this is the only issue where they put politics aside. So, in other words, you would think that you could form a really strong coalition of principled libertarians and opportunistic Republicans who want to make Obama look bad or who don't trust Obama. You would think that you could put together a pretty big coalition that way. But it turns out that even Republicans who will shamelessly support anything to make Obama look bad, when it comes to defunding the security state, no interest in making Obama look bad. No, they really have a lot of faith in Obama's ability to, look at our emails, apparently. And it does strike me as interesting that people who otherwise aren't terribly, principled, who otherwise will really go out of their way to vote for something simply to make Obama look bad. When it comes to this issue, they're very, they're all of a sudden very principled about this. And is it because national defense is such an important issue that it deserves to be taken seriously? I mean, I would hope that that's why, or is it because there are special interests involved that push them this way? That's what I'm interested in.
Now, I'm going to shift topics because I know you working on a piece. I don't know if it's up just yet. You have a novel take on the Anthony Weiner story.
Yes.
I would say the general consensus is this guy creeps me out now, so I don't really see why anyone should really get behind it. But I'm not saying you're not in that camp, but you just had a different angle on the whole thing.
Yes. So I think, far be it from me to defend Anthony Weiner. I mean, I found him utterly obnoxious before the scandal. And I don't defend anything he did. Let me just start with that. Having said that, I found it interesting that like one of the most common criticisms of Weiner has been that he used his power to prey on young women. These are like 22-year-olds, but anyway. Not
that you'd even know who these women are behind a computer screen. You have no idea who you're talking to.
Yeah. Well, the one woman who came forward was 22, and
right.
She was described as a girl sometimes by the press.
She's a consenting adult.
Right. And prey on is bad, but the notion that there's something wrong with using power, a position of power to attract women, struck me as interesting because I'm of the opinion that all men do this all the time and always have. And sometimes, if you're 6'3" and really athletic, you're sort of using power in a sense to attract women. But it's a very subtle use, and you don't have to be showy about it. It's pretty obvious. If you're a rich guy, then you can sort of use implied power. And by the way, there's sort of the implicit, like, I can protect you physically, I can protect you financially, whatever. That's a form of power. You know, Kissinger said it was an aphrodisiac. Aristotle Onassis said, money wouldn't matter if it wasn't for women. I mean, this is not a new thing that I'm discovering here. So if you're a really tall, powerful, muscular, good-looking, rich guy, you're using power. You're using what we call the trappings of power. But what if you're a skinny Jewish kid named Weiner, or a chubby nerd named Newt? Well, you still want to get chicks, but you know, in the old days, you would have really been screwed. You would have had no hope. Like in the day and age.
Well, in the Woody Allen days, a skinny Jewish kid could go a long way.
Exactly.
In his heyday.
If you're smart and you become successful, and that's what these guys did. And I contend that most of the good things that have happened in the world, most of the best music written, most of the best inventions, happened because somebody wanted to impress women. And that you could look, go ahead and attack Anthony Weiner all you want. I am not defending him. But I think that the notion that this is bad, using power, we all do this. And by the way, Huma Abedin, does anybody think that Anthony Weiner, the janitor, would have landed that big fish? I mean, let's be honest. The guy's punching way above his weight with Huma Abedin. Does anybody think that if he wasn't ambitious, if he wasn't successful, that if she didn't think maybe he was the next mayor of New York, that they would have gotten married? So the problem is not. So there's one example of him using a position of power in a sense to get a woman, and he happened to marry her, and I think we can all support that. The problem is he's never quit doing it. He continues to use his power to prey on young women, and that and he does it in a very creepy way, using pictures of his penis, which is hard for most of us to relate to. But I think the notion that oh my gosh, a man who used his position of power to attract women, that's somehow like astonishing and even troubling. I think
everybody. Both sexes, of all sexual orientations, uses intangible qualities or material possessions or positions of status. They use what they have available to them to attract who they want to attract. That's just kind of part of the basic mating ritual. Where it crosses the line is if you are abusing power. If you are doing something that breaks the law with the resources that you have, you're taking government money and spending it on a mistress. That's obviously wrong. If you are forcing someone to do something against their will because you're using your power as a cudgel, that's wrong. Or just simply showing that you're showing you're an attractive person because of the status that you hold, and someone then consents that they agree that you are an attractive person because that's the position that you hold. That's not in and of itself a problem.
Right.
I think there is, and I think there's a general argument to be made that people's general weirdness should not be a disqualifier for public office because they're generally all weird in various respects. You just don't necessarily know about their weirdness. So, and
I don't want to defend the guy, and I'm not defending the guy, but what I am saying is, let's not pretend that everybody doesn't use the trappings of power to try to get what they want. And the most primal need, I think, I don't know what's the pyramid of necessities until you get to it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, at some point, this is a very primal thing, self-actualization and all that stuff, and mating is primal. And let's just not pretend that this doesn't happen all the time. Like, most people don't send pictures out. Most people, there's a lot of weird things about it, and there are a lot of things I don't condone. But let's not get up on our high horse and pretend that the guy driving the fancy car or the guy who joins the rock band isn't doing it to get laid, because you and I both know that.
I mean, I would even take it a step farther and say, look, there are plenty of sexually depraved people in positions of power, and some of them do a good job in positions of power. Your sexual fetishes don't necessarily negatively impact your ability to hold public office. I think Weiner's problem is he has nothing else in his record to put on the table to make a case why you shouldn't look away from my sexual depravity and judge me on my record.
I just want to say, I don't know where I stand on that. I mean, that's not what my piece is about. I mean, you may be right. You could argue that people can compartmentalize, that you could be a great president like Bill Clinton, and also be a philanderer, and that you can compartmentalize, and maybe that's true. You may say it's domain general, that character is with us at all times, and people become bribable, and that it will creep into other areas. I'm not prepared to make a statement on that. I'm just saying this whole sort of puritanical thing where I've seen several people write things about Weiner where they're kind of caught up. They think that the big problem is he's using his position of power, and I'm just saying everyone does that all the time.
No, I have somewhat conflicted feelings about having Puritan standards in politics, because on one hand, just as a practical matter, like, I am thrilled that Obama is just a good family man. It is so much better than having to defend all of Clinton stuff. It is just nice having that the face of your party is just a good spokesman for wholesome American family values. It just makes things a whole lot easier. I think it is a general good that you have a role model in the White House. I'm sorry?
No, I'm just echoing that. I think it's a very good example.
Yeah, it's as a parent, it's a lot easier when your kids they start talking about stuff like presidency and politics with your kids, and to have someone to look up to and say, here's someone to aspire to. I like that. At the same time, there's obviously plenty of examples in history where people who are not like that, who still did a good job and did things that I liked policy-wise. So it's not like I don't think there's an actual connection between private life and public record. I just prefer that not having to deal with the debate if I don't have to, and I like the Obama standard. Hopefully, inspires others to say, "Why don't I take on life the way he does it?" Because that seemed to work out pretty well. The Weiner way doesn't work out as well. But in the Weiner case, in the Clinton case, you had a guy who had been in office for 6 years. And a lot of people could say, you know what, the economy's doing very well right now, so why am I focused on this? This is silly. And so you had to debate about that. Weiner has no executive experience and a scant legislative record. So it's not like I even have to have that debate with him. It's just not worth it. I got other choice. If I lived in New York, I got other choices.
There's also, questions of judgment that transcend sexuality, just taking risks, becoming bribable, corruption. I mean, there's all sorts of ancillary issues that come up that go past the sort of prurient interest. If that makes sense.
Just get a magazine. I mean, how hard is that? Why do you have to go on?
That is your message for the youth of America. Well, look, and I think part of the weirdness here is there's a sense of like a sort of what's the word I'm like, not voyeuristic, but like exhibitionist. There's almost like an exhibitionist side to this. That I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of men especially, could understand. They could understand going to a prostitute. They could understand infidelity. They may not like it, but they could sort of understand it. But try wrapping your brain around the, tweeting and the direct messaging and the
I
sexting.
think there's a long history of men trying to make an arbitrary line between what is okay and not okay.
Well, morally,
and
they're
rationalizing behavior in that way. Well, sure, I go to prostitutes, but everybody does that every so often. That doesn't mean I don't love my wife, so that's okay. That's not having an affair. That's no emotional commitment there. That's just a physical night and whatever. I think there's a long history of guys doing stuff like that, which is all kind of gross and disgusting and wrong. And I'm sure in Weiner's mind, he's like, well, I'm not having an affair. I'm not going to a prostitute. It's a little exciting for me to go online and have it be kind of like a person. But
you could make an argument that it's safer and better.
There's ways to rationalize it. It's still weird. Sure. It's still unnecessary.
But there's the moral question, and I think you could argue that, like, morally, what he did is better than prostitution. But then there's the political question, which seems weirder. And prostitution is the oldest profession. We sort of get that. We get Spitzer. We may not like it, we may not approve of it, but we understand it. But sending pictures of yourself to women, is Joe's six-pack, going to understand that? Or maybe 18-year-olds might, I guess. But I think that politically speaking, the weirdness makes it more problematic.
I mean, I think you look at him now and you're kind of creeped out, and you can't supplant that feeling with a substantive record of any significance. So all you're left with, you're now forced to make a vote for him is now a referendum on this question of private behavior and public service. Right.
Wasn't he like a huge liberal, though? I mean, wasn't he a huge liberal hero? I mean, I remember I could not stand him, because he was so obnoxious, and he would go on TV all the time and be just such a mean-spirited, evil leftist.
Well, I think
that was my impression.
Well, I think
did that not earn him a lot of love from the left, or am I wrong?
Well, no, I think there is a strand of the left that had been looking for combative public figures and wanted to see them on TV and not be mealy-mouthed. In the face of a conservative talk show host or a Republican congressperson by your side, and felt that was the most important thing that was needed in our public discourse to kind of level the playing field. And that's why people like Weiner, why people like Alan Grayson, a few others like that. But at least with Grayson, you can just point to a couple of pieces of legislation that actually got passed, like stuff on the Fed auditing, for example. He worked with the Ron Paul types and most of that stuff through. With Weiner, you don't even have that. And so, I agree with you that there were some folks on the left that were kind of Anthony Weiner fans, but that's not a big enough pool of people to get you through an actual election, in a citywide election. Maybe can get you through a congressional district when it's a Democratic district, you don't have any primary challengers, and a Republican's going to be token opposition. Now you have a question of, okay, can you handle a city budget? Can you handle negotiations with public sector unions? What are you going to do about attracting new business? What are you going to do about things like sports stadiums? There's lots of bread and butter type issues that a mayor's got to deal with. And he's got no track record on the subject. So just being a liberal firebrand on TV a handful of times, that's not enough to carry you through a real local election like that.
Well, it is interesting. I recently spoke to a prominent New York City conservative, more accurately, pro-life conservative, who was rooting for Weiner to win because felt he was a sort of a regular politician that they could work with compared to Quinn, who is more of a conviction politician, who would be more, she would be more apt to actually advance a liberal worldview and policy as opposed to Weiner, who would be just sort of a politician who would respond and just try to be popular. So it is interesting that sometimes politics makes for strange bedfellows, as we say.
I mean, for a position like that, you're never going to know exactly how they're going to approach the job until they get in there. Once you're in a shutdown, obviously your perspective is going to be altered, and how easy you are to work with, you'll find out in due course. The problem with Weiner is just that you don't have a lot of examples to work with, and the sexual, if you want to call it a scandal, or just the fact that it's a story, just crowds everything else about him because there's not much else there to work with.
Well, I guess we'll have to end it on a sort of creepy note. But just leave your comments, folks, and let's see if you can top 350.
I feel like I think with Weiner we could do that.
I don't think so. I don't think they have it in them. I really don't. I think you think more highly of them than I do.
Always good to talk to you, Matt.
Likewise. Good show, and we'll be back here in the DMZ next week. Have a good week.
Take care.